All right, so we just explained marginal analysis, but what if we used a different decision-making framework? So let's dive into that. Okay, so we have the same guy, my buddy Abby. He's now hosting a major party in his backyard. He just bought a ton of beer for $400. He spent $400 on beer, right? A lot of money. That's how he rolls. He's a big spender, whatever. But he made a rookie mistake and he left the bottles of beer outside all day, and now they smell like a skunk. And speaking of skunks, my cat is moving the mouse right now and switching my slides. But he got a bunch of beer and he working from home is fun, guys. So he got a bunch of beer. He left them out in the sun. It produces like this weird chemical. That's why some bottles are green, because it lessens the chemical. But leaving them out in the sun will make the beers smell and taste crappy. Okay? But Abby's thinking, yo, I just spent $400 on beer. There is no way I'm letting it go to waste. So what does he do? He starts drinking the dirty beers despite disliking the taste. Why would he do that? Why would he do that? Well, in his mind, he just spent $400. Like, he's emotionally attached to this beer, right? But it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. He's actively decreasing his utility. This is a good that he gets negative utility on. This is something that he should not be consuming at all. But instead, he's consuming $400 worth. Okay? Lucky for Abby, he's got a friend who studies economics. And his friend goes, hey, Abby, what are you doing? Think about what you're doing, you meatball head. You're consuming something that you do not like just because you spend money on it. It doesn't make sense. He goes, but I spent so much money on this beer. No. Abby's a silly little man. He's a meatball head. This is a textbook example of what we call the sunk cost fallacy. You're justifying your continued consumption of something that you don't like based on costs you've already incurred. So you've already paid the cost. Okay? Your marginal cost for consuming the beer is zero, but your marginal utility is negative. You're consuming something that you do not like. So you're actively decreasing, or I shouldn't say your marginal cost is zero. Your explicit cost is zero. Your marginal cost is, the hangover, the grossness of taste. And on top of that, you're probably getting disutility from drinking them. So you're paying some opportunity cost, and you're paying, you're consuming something with actively negative utility. This is what we call the sunk cost fallacy, and it shows up often when people aren't using marginal analysis. This is like an alternative to marginal analysis that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And you'll see it a lot, and everybody's been guilty of it. Me personally, I guess this is on YouTube, so whatever. She finds out, whatever. But I once dated a girl for much longer time than I should have, even though I was unhappy. You spend the time building the relationship, and the time you spend is really, it's done. You can't recover that time. You can't be like, oh, well, I've spent all my college years in this relationship. I would like to go back, undo that, and get my college years dating back. You can't do that. The cost is already incurred. But what you can do is say, all right, well, whatever. I spent the cost. I've lost a lot of time on dating someone who is clearly the wrong person. But I can move forward and not waste the opportunity cost of dating this wrong person when there's other options available to me that are probably better suited for me. That is the sunk cost fallacy, the idea that you would stay with someone just because you spent time on building that relationship. And of course, in the real world, you're going to make your decisions based on some balance in between, because you can't recoup that time, but also it might be the case that when you're making your marginal decision, you're not really thinking super rationally the way that an economist would assume that you would. So maybe you're making your marginal decision based on a high opportunity cost, that there's someone else who's better for you. But in reality, you're either overestimating your own attractiveness, or you're making decisions on the fly that, tomorrow that won't be true. So, like, let's say you're considering cheating and you're like, oh, this makes a whole lot of sense in the moment. But once you're out of the moment, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense at all. So, it's the sunk cost fallacy, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. But if when you make the decision, you can't go back on it either. Sometimes it makes sense to go a little bit by the sunk cost fallacy, in as much as understand that some preferences aren't going to be as rational as an economist would look at them. Another example might be, let's say you're in grad school or a job or something, and you're like, oh, I put so much time into this. I've got all this experience, but if the projected marginal utility isn't going to be greater than the projected cost, which includes opportunity cost, then it might make sense to leave. Okay? All right. And this is just a clip from an image from a movie that I like called Can't Hardly Wait. That's all. All right. So they call these beers skunk beers, and so as a thing to help you remember sunk cost, you can remember skunk beers, sunk costs. So ignore sunk costs because they won't get you anywhere. Okay. Not in economics, and generally speaking, not in life. They're bad decision-making tools. By sunk cost, I mean when you've already incurred, when you've already paid the amount, you've already incurred the cost, and you use that to justify your decision. Okay.